don't want that view. Wait, okay, why am I not getting? I just want. Here, let's take this out for a second. Slideshow. Use presenter view. Okay. I'm not getting, like I need the speaker's notes, you know?
Oh, the notes.
If I do duplicate, then I get the screen, but I don't get my... Oh, why isn't this in presenter view? I don't know why, because it's been working all conference, but I'm not getting my presenter view. Oh, there, it finally did it. As soon as I mentioned that.
Just let me know if I need to move
Yeah.
close and then.
Yeah, you're magic. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Orbach again. I'm from the University of Washington, and this is my last act as general chair. It's been a tiring week. Oh, thanks. Thank you all for remaining to the very end here. I think you'll be very glad you did. Today, we are going to have an interview with Marissa Mayer. She is CEO and co-founder of Sunshine, a startup focused on making everyday tasks easier. Previously, she served as CEO and president of Yahoo. At Yahoo, she led a full-scale transformation of the company, rejuvenating its culture, hiring more than 5,000 people, growing users to more than 1 billion people worldwide, with over 600 million users on mobile, and transforming Yahoo's culture and business. During her tenure, she oversaw the creation of more than $40 billion of shareholder value. That's a lot of very big numbers in one short paragraph. Prior to Yahoo, Marissa spent 13 years at Google, where she joined as the 20th employee and the first woman engineer. She played an instrumental role in leading Google Search as well as Google Maps, Google News, and other consumer products. Previously, Marissa graduated with honors from Stanford University with a BS in Symbolic Systems. That was my major also, so go SimSys. I know there's a few others in the room. And an MS in Computer Science with a specialization in artificial intelligence. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Marissa Mayer.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you for coming. I'm very excited to have you. So we're going to have about 30, 35 minutes of a conversation up here, and then we'll open it up to you all for questions, so you can begin to think ahead of time if you have questions. We also have some of the questions that I'll be asking came from you during the last few days. So thank you to those who sent questions. I couldn't include all of them, but I did my best to represent the most popular types of questions that I got. So the first question is a bit of just an icebreaker. And I want to ask you if you remember this.
I absolutely do. So this is, Jake and I go way back. We were programming partners at Stanford, along with another woman, Jen Fitzpatrick, who now runs Google Maps. Ironically, so we've all stayed in touch. But I came up to visit Jake here in Oregon, and this is us river rafting. And I have to say, at some point later in the day, we got to the end of the river rafting, and they were like, you know what's really fun? It's really fun to ride the rapids in your vest. And so they had us like all kind of pile out of the raft. And I have to say, like, I somehow got unsyncopated going over the rapids, so I was breathing when I was down and like, you know, holding my breath when I was up, and it has to be the closest I've ever felt to drowning. So it was quite the afternoon, but it was fun, though it was the last time I've gone river rafting since, so I haven't river rafted in the second half of my life because of this day.
So what makes this picture is kind of special for me in particular is this was on the Deschutes River, which is running about 50 yards right outside that window. We were about 90 minutes north of here. That's a little small, but this is the same river we're all next to right here. That's just a coincidence, but kind of special. Yeah, this was in 1999. I was working as an intern at the Intel Mattel Smart Toy Lab, and you had just joined a kind of small startup that was into search. So we'll hear more about that in a moment. Just in case you're all wondering, whoops, other way. That's Marissa, I think we can probably tell. That's actually me. I know it's hard to tell because that's when I had hair and muscles, and now I have neither hair nor muscles. So the hair and the muscles are gone. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Let's go back and we'll just leave it here. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I would love to hear, you know, from the moments that you were in that raft. To the moment you're sitting here, kind of what some of your major career stages and milestones were for anyone in the room who might want to understand kind of how you got here today.
Sure. Well, when I graduated from Stanford in 1999, which was, you know, the height of the web boom, and my background was artificial intelligence, and so I was interested in search. Ended up picking Google, and I started there as a software engineer. So was interested in AI, was working on different like search algorithms and things like that. It was a small company. When I interviewed, it was 8 people. When I joined, the 19th and 20th of us started on the same day. We got to the fall, and then we realized we didn't have any user interface engineers or people who knew anything about HCI. And so I remember at the time, my then boss came to me and said, you know, do you know anyone who knows anything about user interface? But, you know, we think we probably need 1 day a week of a person on UI, and we need the other 4 days of the week to be like programming on systems. And I was like, actually, I do. I know the perfect person. His name is Jake Woprock. I will reach out to him. Jake was at another startup at the time that also was very high potential. And I remember at the end, I was like, hey, Jake, like, come over. And like, I failed to recruit Jake to Google. And so Jake was like, no, I'm good. I'm happy over here. I'm doing my thing. Like, no, thank you. And I was like, okay, great. And then after, you know, I tried to recruit 2 or 3 other friends that I knew from HCI type disciplines. And then when I failed, then the same boss, or they came back to me in November and was like, well, look, like, we appreciate your attempts in recruiting and as an HCI grad, but you failed, and we still have to do these interface things. And you have this weird background called symbolic systems, and it seems like it has cognitive psychology in it. So we think that you should be the one who does UI design and HCI like 1 day a week, and then do your AI programming the other 4 days of the week. And so I was like, okay, fine. And then I remember, as I was like walking out the door, where it was like, oh, and one more thing, like we don't need your opinions, we need data. So it was kind of interesting because my mom was an art teacher, I have a lot of respect for art and design, but I was literally tasked with like, do this one day a week on the side, and please don't actually like think about stylistically what should happen on the interface, like please just test everything that you can possibly test. So continued on in that mode for a while as a software engineer, and because of the work on the user interface, like should the results be serifed or sans serifed, right? It's kind of funny now that you look at it because it's obvious that they should be sans serifed, but they were serifed when I like got handed that assignment after Jake said no, and I had to fill in November. And so we had to do all these different tests, but as a result, I ended up closer and closer to the interface. And so I found myself in the state where, engineers would build PDF search, or they'd build an interface in a new language, and then they'd be like, where should the controls for this on Google go? Should it go on advanced search? Should it go into settings? All of those types of things. And so I'd have to be like, okay, what are you building? Where should it go? How should it work? So I kind of ended up closer and closer to design and the front end, and ultimately working on the UI team in addition to some of the categorization and classification work I was doing. And then over time, like 3 years in, transitioned to product management. It was kind of a fun thing that our founder, Larry Page, went and visited all kinds of other companies in the area, and he came back and he's like, our company's kind of set up like every other company, except all these other companies have this function called product management. And we don't have product managers, but we have like these 2 or 3 people in the company who, basically do their job, and they also do this notion of like trying to figure out how things should work and look and function and what we should focus on in the future. So got moved over into product management, and then started product managing things like Google News, Google Search, all the consumer. I started off kind of as product manager of consumer, and then eventually like director of consumer web, which meant like Gmail, all of those things as they got started, and then eventually got focused very much on search and like image search, news search, product search, all of those types of things. And then transitioned over into Google Maps at the end of my time at Google, because Maps to me is a very interesting kind of contextual search problem, and we can talk more about what that means later. And then didn't really think I was very happy at Google. I thought I would stay there for pretty much forever. I was pregnant with my first child. I was planning on taking a glorious Google paid 6-month maternity leave and returning to Google daycare and all of those types of things. And then I got approached by Yahoo to interview for the CEO role in the summer of 2012. And so moved over to Yahoo in July of 2012 and ran it for roughly 5 years, just under 5 years. And then we sold the company, or the operating company, to Verizon. And then about a year after that, started my current company, which is SIGCHI. It's a little startup. We're about the same size as Google was when I joined. We're like 23, 25 people. And we've got 2 apps in the App Store, Sunshine Birthdays and Sunshine Contacts. We can talk about the broader vision of what we're trying to build is. But yeah, that's a little bit of the circuitous path here. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. So you've definitely had roles starting in AI, but clearly pulled into HCI even more than 1 day a week over time. How do you think back to, AI and HCI have clearly become very infused. There's been also a huge AI renaissance going on. Tons of UIST papers and projects that we've seen over the last few days have combinations of AI and HCI. How do you look back and see those 2 sort of subfields and your experience of them? And do you look back and feel like your contributions ended up more in one way or the other, or kind of both? What's the relationship between those 2 subfields for you?
I think that artificial intelligence has changed a lot since the 90s when I studied it at Stanford. That said, it's interesting because now when we work on ML projects at Sunshine, and even when we worked on them at Yahoo, the fundamentals are very much the same. The scale of data, what you can learn off of, the types of nets that you're learning, layers, and just the computational power that you can deploy on a certain problem, that's obviously expanded by many orders of magnitude in that time. And it's a different approach as opposed to a rules-based or heuristics-based system. The fact that it's sometimes more of a black box, you don't necessarily know why it's learning what it's learning. But I think I still am pretty current on the underpinnings of it, and I think the underpinnings and the foundation there is very much the same in terms of the vision of how it can be deployed. I think that, in terms of HCI, I really took an interest in it based on knowing you and being interested in you and like going through some of the coursework at Stanford, and then, really learning on the job, really learning from, watching user studies, doing split A/B tests, and all those types of things in terms of what worked for people and what didn't. And when I think about both fields have come really far, when you think about touch interfaces and some of the interactions that are now possible, they almost look like science fiction when you compare them back to what things looked like in the end of the 90s. So both fields have advanced a lot. I will say in my work, they've stayed more separate than together, though they obviously have an interaction. And it is kind of ironic because while artificial intelligence is what brought me to Google, and I think it's a really exciting space inside of computer science at the moment, there's no question in my mind that the UI side of the work actually played a much bigger role in what I contributed. I would say both at Google and to the revamp of the product suite that we executed at Yahoo. There was certainly some AI in both situations, and now Google is really an AI powerhouse. But at the time, the basic search was really quite brute force, and with lots of heuristics and signals applied on top of it. And the design of the interfaces that, although they've evolved over time, still have a lot of the same underpinnings of like how Gmail looks and works, right? Like how, a curated interface like Google News works and looks, those types of things, have really stood the test of time if you think about how we've laid it out, the design work we did, some of the research we did to try and make decisions around those things.
You mentioned making design choices through data, that you were encouraged, maybe even forced to do that. And you might not be surprised that this question came from a member of the community. They have to ask about the many dozens of shades of blue, and the more broad point that sort of designing through data, designing through massive, essentially crowdsourcing elements of design was something that you're well known for having done, and even maybe being a proponent of, at least for a time. How do you think the role of designers has evolved and changed in light of data and the abundance of data? Do designers need to be trained differently, or is that still a specialization that's, that doesn't need to become also a data scientist, which is kind of its own thing? How do you see that?
Sure, I think that there's a couple of key points here and a couple of important anecdotes. So to me, I respect, as I said, art and design a lot. And to me, when you first come up with an interface, you want someone who takes a bold, clean, interesting, innovative, provocative thought and translates it into a design. Then I think once you've got that, you optimize it with data, right? How can you change it? How can you lay it out? How can you explain it to the user? How can you make it more intuitive? And you do that by making small iterative changes to it to overall find the local maxima in terms of how well that feature or style of interface performs. That's exactly what Google was, right? That bold, there's, the whole web, many of you probably looking at the crowd weren't actually born then, but were in kindergarten. But in 1999, the web flashed and revolved and literally asked you to punch the monkey. There were ads where the monkey ran back and forth across the screen and you had to click it to actually be able to read your news. And so at that time, now everyone's kind of so used to the style of Google design, but to just have a blank white page with a search box and very little else on it, and a couple of buttons and a logo, was provocative. People literally, when I went out and talked about Google's UI, the question I always got was what were you thinking? Who came up with that idea? And I can't take credit for it. It was our founder, Sergey, who did it, where he was just kind of lazy, didn't want to spend a lot of time on HTML, but he was like, look, I want the focus to be on the search. I don't want it to be on the interface and news and all this other stuff. He's like, I want the search to stand for itself, almost like a chef making a meal, being like, I want this flavor to come through. I want the flavor of search to be first. So I think that, that to me is very much the art and craft of design, and it's the foundation for everything that happens. It starts with art and that design thought, and then the science really is, can you take it and iterate it and make it better using that? I will say, in terms of two kind of fun anecdotes from that, I was proud to be part of the team at Google that kind of co-invented at two different companies at the same time, split A/B testing. So coming out of that, that discussion with Urs, where he was like, we don't need opinions, we need data. I was like, well, what do you mean? And he was like, well, we've got enough traffic now that we should be able to say, like, run 1% of the results this way, run 1% of the search results that way, see which way people seem to like it better, look for metrics, what indicates the user's having more success or less success with the interface. And so it was funny because I guess the conversation must have been in October of '99. And we actually went, and it's probably a good thing that it didn't happen, but Google went to actually patent the idea of doing these kinds of percentage-based experiments. And our patent actually got denied because the head of UI at Amazon is a really talented woman named Miriam Mohit. It's funny because she's MM and I'm MM. But it turns out she also had notes from October of 1999 at Amazon where they were like, oh, we should actually start iterating and taking parts of our fractions of our traffic and starting to try and iterate how things would work. And so we kind of, Google and Amazon kind of co-invented A/B design because we did. They were like, okay, well, this is clearly evidence that skilled minds in the field think alike, and it's an obvious invention. So the patent went to neither of us as a result. But it's interesting because I do think it gave rise to all kinds of really well-informed iterations in interface. The 40 Shades of Blue is funny because I don't think I've ever told the story, and I will say it was told from the other side. And I do understand and I can sympathize with the other side, but I've never told the other side of the story because I really didn't feel like his telling wasn't necessarily fair to me, my telling might not be fair to him. But what happened was, I was in charge of search. The links on the search page were a very true royal blue that actually matched the Google logo really nicely. So the whole page kind of looked well composed and coordinated. Gmail started off with the same color blue G, but kind of iterated over the time to basically a shade of aqua. There was just a lot more green in it, and their interface was also really nicely composed. And by the way, I like all shades of blue. It was a really lovely shade of aqua they had evolved to. It was a really lovely shade of blue that we had on the search results page. And Larry and Sergey got kind of irritated with the difference. So they came and they were like, look, Gmail's like aqua and search is like this other shade of blue. And we don't like it when our interfaces look like they've been made by two different teams. It bothers us that the Gmail interface looks like it's being made and evolved by a different team than the search interface, and even though that's true, we just don't want the products to feel that way. We don't want them to feel that divorced from each other. Can you ratify it? So I went to the Gmail team and I was like, look, we've got to kind of sort this out. And as designers will tend to do, because I had my hand in design sometimes too, the designer who was in charge of Gmail was like, I really like my color choices. They really work for us. And I was like, I get it. I really like my color choices. Our color choices really work for us. And we were like, okay, well, how will we decide this? And I was like, here's the problem. If we change the color of blue on the search results page, an influence of people click on it 1% less, 0.5% less, that's huge when you're operating at Google scale. And Gmail, same thing. You've got hundreds, at that time now they've probably got billions of accounts, but hundreds of millions of accounts of email, and you're like, if people start to read their email differently and less efficiently, that's also really bad because obviously Google had really prided itself on efficiency all the time. So you're like, okay, what do you do? And you've got kind of two strong-minded designers that really like their design on this minutia of color. And I said, well, I guess the beautiful thing about the web is colors are just numbers. They're written in hex, right? But we can actually, your shade of blue is here, my shade of blue is there, and it turns out there's 40 shades in between, right? So we can just we can take the Google traffic on Gmail and on search, and we can actually divide and put 2.5% of traffic on each of the different shades in between, and we can actually map which one is most advantageous to both Gmail and to search. And we did exactly that. So I can understand from a design perspective why that was irksome. You want the color that you want, but I was like, I think we can actually scientifically prove, because we're running this over billions of clicks, which one works best for both of us. And it didn't. By the way, both colors changed. I will say Gmail changed more. They changed more to a royal, and which is maybe why he smarted a bit about it. But the search color changed as well. And interestingly, while Gmail had more green in the search results had less green and red in it. It turned out the optimal color actually had more red in it than either of us. So it actually was like a little further in the spectrum in the other direction. But anyway, so that's the backstory from at least my side on it. I just was honestly trying to be as fair and scientific as opposed to just arguing over opinions. And I also felt like the scale that we were optimizing over, it was important to actually get it right and consider all possibilities. And as I said, hex math makes that easy.
All right, everyone. You've all heard now the definitive account of the 40 Shades of Blue. Let that question never, ever be asked again. I'm kidding, of course. Okay, let's move on to Yahoo a little bit. So this also comes from our community this week. When you were CEO of Yahoo, you somewhat famously ended all the, or most at least of the work from home practices. Then, of course, the pandemic struck, and suddenly we all found ourselves working from home. And now that we've gone a little bit beyond the beginning of the pandemic and well into and hopefully coming out the other side, a lot of firms are continuing work from home and work remote and hybrid work situations. Looking back on that choice, do you, and then in light of the pandemic and what we've learned in it, do you still think that was the right choice? Do you feel like that there were learnings in that still hold true? Have you revised your thinking in light of the pandemic? And where do you think we're going to end up as an industry, say 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts there. I will say when I made the decision at Yahoo, you know, I have to own it. It was my decision. It was influenced. I wasn't like I came to Yahoo with an agenda and work from home. I had about 30 really high performers in the company come and say, like, we like the energy, we like the direction. There's a lot of people who work from home when they feel like it, and it's zapping our momentum. And that resonated with me, and I heard it a lot. And so we didn't take the stance. Actually, the people who had been officially made work from home actually all basically kept their status. It was the people who were just like, you know what, it's raining today, I don't feel like going into work, those types of people. And I will say, you know, for me, I wasn't trying to make, I don't have an agenda. My brother's worked from home, has worked from home since 2000, like, nothing against it. I just think that it has its place and its time. And for Yahoo, in full candor, you know, it was a turnaround. It had been declining, it had been declining for years. You know, we were trying to make one last go at a comeback for the company, and that requires a different intensity and a different amount of collaboration than, you know, keeping something going. That said, in the pandemic, made all the sense in the world to stay home. I, like many people, have a sign in my front window saying, you know, stay home, stay safe, save lives. And so, you know, I think that had its place too. I will say today, I think that, you know, I appreciate the freedom that work from home gives. One of my observations, because I've worked at big companies and I also worked at small companies, and I have friends who run, you know, both types of companies. I will say that I do think work from home it favors the giants, right? It's much easier, in my view, to be a Google or a Facebook where you're like, I've got the strategy, I know what the teams do, right? We can change the jobs, count on someone not being here this day or that day, or being less available this day or that day, and it works. It's very hard to do that in a 20-person company. I talked to another like larger startup CEO, and he was just like, you know, yeah, like I didn't necessarily like his term, but he called them micro pivots. He's like, in a little company, the number of micro pivots you make every day, like little adjustments here and there, he's like, it adds up over time. Where if you're like, wait, like I have this idea or I have this decision to make, it doesn't seem worth it to call a Zoom meeting, I'll just make it or I just won't make it. And that adds up over time and can really affect where the company goes. So I think, and it's interesting because I talked to one of our investors who also runs like a big Fortune 500 company, and I was like, I don't know why, but it feels like when we're this small, you know, we should be together. And he was like, totally, like under 100 people. He's like, there's no way like you can really start to set direction and strategy without it. So right now I'd say at Yahoo, it meant we had to all be together. During the pandemic, it meant it made perfect sense to be at home. And now I think, you know, for big companies, the work from home will continue and should continue. And for smaller companies, there's going to need to be probably more collaboration, more in-person time. That's just my view. But I also think that, you know, the pandemic, I didn't really fully appreciate the full spectrum of like human interactions. I think what the pandemic did is if you kind of say, okay, on one end of the spectrum, there's, you know, sitting in a room quietly working by yourself, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you're like, I'm in a meeting, paying like rapt attention, ready to participate at any moment, right? The world of like working from home and like being on Zoom basically forced everything to the two ends of the spectrum. And that notion of, you know, well, I happened to run into them at the break room, or I happened to catch them in the hallway in the, you know, on their way to the bathroom, and we had an interesting conversation that led to more later. Or even as Jake and I did back in the day, like that notion of like, okay, like we'll program next to each other for 2 or 3 hours not talking, but every now and then when we get stuck being like, hey, can you look at this? Right, where there's just no way we would have been like, let's have a Zoom call, like you can look at my array and try and figure out what's going wrong with like the memory, right, like in this, so.
Yeah, I needed you to debug my code. I mean, that's really what happened.
But it was, you know, those types of things really got subtracted by the pandemic. And I will say, we're back in the office now for not full-time, but a lot of time. And it feels good because you can actually feel the return of those kinds of conversations coming back. And it just does feel like a lot more fluid, and you just build a lot more momentum, especially as a small company, small team.
So that's a great lead into the next part, which is Sunshine. You're now CEO and founder of Sunshine. You know, you could presumably pursue whatever startup in whatever technology sector you might want. So what made you decide that you wanted to pursue, according to your mission statement, making mundane tasks effortless, freeing up our time as users, making it easier to be thoughtful? Why Sunshine Contacts, and you mentioned Sunshine Birthdays? What drew you to this particular set of problems?
Well, first of all, I'll point out that I'm co-founder.
Okay.
We're both there full-time, but I've got a really talented co-founder, Enrique Munoz-Torres, and I've always been interested in events and groups. And as we were winding down Yahoo for the sale, we, you know, we went through a long close process, and during that we had to kind of lay out in the fall at a company, you'll, you know, do a big strategy brainstorm, and we brainstormed strategy, and Enrique had a lot of interesting ideas on events and groups and everyday tasks, and I was like, I had this kind of interest in events and groups and everyday tasks, and I remember grabbing him after the meeting and being like, you know, it probably doesn't make sense for us to pursue that here, because it's like remodeling a bathroom in a house that's already sold. You're like, the new owner's not gonna like it, they're not gonna appreciate it, we're just gonna end up moving away from it. But we kind of almost, we joke that it was almost like an affair to remember pact. We're like, but if we're both ever not here at Yahoo and we want to start a company, we should talk to each other and see if we're, you know, if we want to pursue this together. And then sure enough, about 9 months after we left, we made the decision to go ahead and start the company. So I will say, you know, in that process of selling Yahoo, we had to have, there was a kind of a sad day where we had to come up with a blog post of like, we're selling the company, and we had to try and summarize the impact that Yahoo had had over its 22 years of history at that point. And we had all these statistics, so I like numbers a lot on the board, like the marriages, the cars sold, the jobs found, the emails sent, right? And then one of the members of my team, who's just really poignant, said, you know, if you try to sum it up, they're just like, you know, there's a lot of successful companies in the world, there's a lot of profitable companies in the world, but there's very few that actually change what people do and how they think about it. And they're like, and Yahoo is one of those companies. And I realized that for me, it's less about the role that I play. Is it AI? Is it, you know, HCI? Is it CEO? But that was true for Yahoo. That was true for Google. And I like working on products that change the way people think and what they do on an everyday level. And I also think that because of my experience, like that's also where my intuition is. When I left Yahoo, I met with a lot of different startups. Like I met with one of the, at the time, like big real estate startups. And I was like, I just realized I spent so much time thinking about email and maps and search, things that you might do, you know, a dozen times a day for a minute here, a minute there, and how do you optimize that? That I had almost no intuition for something if you're like selling your house, which I guess people do, you know, 3 times in a lifetime. I was like, I have no idea like what types of decisions and what expectations people have in that kind of scenario. And so I was like, I like to work on everyday tasks, those types of things where, and I also like to work in an area where I think you make a really big impact where once people tend to underestimate if it's done well, how much it matters, right? I think that people underestimated search in 1999. That's why Google, and they didn't really want to start a company. They wanted to sell their technology, and they failed to because everyone was just like, search is good enough, search is good enough. And they were like, we don't think that's true. We think search is really good. It really makes all the difference. Same thing, I would argue for Facebook, that ability to share news about yourself, find interesting media for you. When that's done really, really well, you would love it or hate it, but it has a really profound effect. And our view is, if you think about it, companies have CRMs, customer relationship managers. That said, there's nothing equivalent in the consumer space, like personal relationship managers. How do you remember people's birthdays? If you're throwing a birthday party for your child, you want to be like, okay, give me a list of everyone they've been in class with and had after-school activities with in the last year or two. Give me a list to kind of pick through. And by the way, if you miss someone, that's horrible, right?
I have to ask my wife, but that doesn't scale. So,
so I think that we were like, wait, there's all these kinds of things that if you actually do a good job of that, it becomes part of everyone's daily life. So the vision is to build a portfolio company that does work on things like events and groups, both big and small, but also understands contacts and calendar, and just helps people be more thoughtful and actually spends less time, putting phone numbers into your phone and trying to organize lists of people, and spend more time actually thinking about the content of the conference, right? What you want to do together, those types of things. And so that's the overall view. We're small, but we have birthdays and smart contacts in the App Store now, and it's been really gratifying. We got a review on Sunday where they just said, wow, I had no idea how amazing it would be to have all my friends' birthdays in one place, because we actually integrate from your calendar, we integrate from Facebook, we put it all together, and they're like, it's just clear that but there's part of it I wasn't so excited about, as they said, it's really clear that Apple's going to go ahead and just integrate this into contacts, because once you see it, it's so obvious that that's what you should do. But I was like, that's what the compliment, and a little bit scary as a tiny little company, but it's been gratifying to see those types of things, that if we can help people get organized, it can free up their time, let them spend less time looking at their screen, right? Because in my view, the best UI is sometimes no UI, right? To actually be able to have that time to spend how you want to spend it. And to see that if we can do a good job of that, I think there really is a big opportunity there.
So I'm going to turn a question about us to you, which is people in this room are extremely talented at solving technology problems. But we have a question from the community about how often in companies or academic settings as well, the problems we run into are not always just technology problems or technical problems, but they're people problems. What advice do you have as an executive who's managed thousands of people, for the technically savvy and technologically gifted folks like are in this room? What could we learn to do better on the people problem side?
I think that, I guess there's so many different directions you could take that question, but
Okay, what's one thing we could do better?
I think, one thing that I thought was actually really freeing from my time at Yahoo is one thing I tried to teach the company was don't look for the no. Because when companies get really big, it turns out if you run around and ask 60 stakeholders, does anyone have an objection to this? Right? You'll find it. If you go looking for the no, you'll find it, right? And I was like, instead, if you're just like, you know what, I'm going to check in with the 2 or 3 people who I think are most germane and approximate to what I'm about to do, and if they seem good with it, I'm going to go, right? It's kind of that old adage of ask for forgiveness, not for permission. But what I found was there were a lot of people. Yahoo had a really nice culture. There were a lot of incredibly talented people there, but they worried a lot about making everything work well together and how interconnected all the systems were and how to make everything work for the users and for the finances and everything else. And I was like, if you go and ask, some of them would be like, well, I'm trying to get approval for an engineer on this, or to launch this feature, or to do this design, or to develop this. And I'd be like, well, who have you asked? And they'd be like, I've asked these 40 people. And I'd be like, well, of course you were going to get 10% no's in that, right? But I was like, but I'm not sure that those no's should have stopped you. And so I would think that that's probably the adage I would offer. don't look for the no.
I love that. That's great. Okay. Don't look for the no. That's great. Researchers in our community, and I'm sure in any research community, ultimately want to have impact, and that can mean a lot of things. But in this community in particular, with the creation of so many great, digital and physical artifacts, demos, new technologies, lots of invention, we often do hope, in certain projects at least, to have some kind of industry interest or industry uptake. What can we do to make the kind of work we do in HCI research more relevant and adoptable by industry? Are we even on your map? Are we making a difference? Is this just like a hobby for all of us?
No, I think, and obviously I'm a big proponent of design, so to me it matters a lot. I think that it's a bit of a marriage where you have to look at where the technology is going and sort of where the heat is, right? So every now and then you'll say, wait, I've been doing this interesting, work, and it's really applicable to this area. So like, I think applications of interfaces to the right technology problem make all the difference. It's a somewhat probably dated example for this community, but from a layperson standpoint, it's probably the most tangible one. If you look back, I believe it was actually at CMU, there was, it may have also been MIT a bit, but they had done so much research on multi-touch interfaces, right? But you were like, this is very interesting, it's clear it's really expressive, right? Like what can happen with multi-touch? And it remained very academic until the iPhone came along. And then once you have a form factor, right, that can be in your hand where you can actually use multi-touch, right? And I think it was Jeff Hahn, I think it was the person who did it. Is Jeff here?
Raise your hand.
Sorry,
a little higher,
okay.
Jeff. A little higher.
Sorry, I'm embarrassed to be quoting you. Probably could get this talk better than I could. But I think your early work was all on much bigger interfaces and actually using your body to do the multi-touch. But then to see how it actually comes together when it's on a much smaller screen in your hand was really electrifying. And so I think being flexible and understanding when there's that moment where you're like, the technology is ripe for the application of this research in this way, that's an incredibly powerful example of how research that started out in the academic space became some of the most interesting and commercially viable interface work ever done. Like, huge kudos to you. I just have so much respect for what you did.
I'll just correct one point in the record that Jeff did this work at NYU.
Oh,
although CMU and MIT, But it was published at UIST, and when I was program chair, it won the Lasting Impact Award in 2016. I thought that was a good choice. All right. Let's go ahead and do one last question for me, and then we'll open up the audience. You've done a lot of things professionally. Obviously, we've just talked about so many of them. But you're also a mom. And a human being, like we all want to aspire to be, human beings, that is. I'm a parent as well. And when we have kids and we have screens in our pockets, and at least in my case with my teenager and my daughter, they want a screen in their hands and in their pockets, and also with social media being such a profound gravitational pull on them, it's a real challenge, I think, for most parents. I can't imagine you haven't had this conversation with other parents, and probably will even more, and probably many of us in the room can relate. What's your thinking about your kids and screen time, social media exposure, their development as citizens, their development as human beings? Are you going to prevent this? Are you going to allow this?
My children are 10 in 4th grade, and then I've got identical twins, 6 and 6 in 1st grade. So in my view, I have a bit of time. My husband and I have talked about it. We think that, frankly, it might be late, but we think that high school is the right time for that to come in. So that said, I've got one of my identical twins who's 6, who's like, her favorite number is 14, because she's realized that's how old she'll be when she gets her phone. And so she's already like looking forward to it. But I think we probably have all seen the research that we want our children interacting in the physical world. There was an interesting piece of research done that when you stack blocks, like stacking blocks in 3 dimensions in the real world, you literally learn, you have 1,000 times more neurons activated, and you're learning 1,000 times more than if you move a block on an iPad screen. And so just, you can imagine, just balance, weight, everything, all the different aspects that come into play. So we do have screens. Actually, the way we've already structured it is that I own the iPads and I allow them to use it. That said, they each kind of have one that is dedicated to them. But we generally only allow it when we travel, and only if it's a car ride or it's travel on a plane or whatever that's more than half an hour, and usually it's only half the time that we're in transit, because we want them to be looking around and taking things in. So I would say screen time, we think it should be limited. Social media, I think, will come into play later. And I also just think it's something that honestly moves a lot. I remember even before I had kids, getting taught the rules of the road and rules of engagement by my elders at Google who had kids at the time, and they were like, "Wow, this is the way it works." They were like, "It shows that kids should not use computers in their bedrooms unsupervised. So you just tell your children that the Wi-Fi doesn't reach their bedroom and make them work in the kitchen." And I was like, I don't know about you guys, but even my 6-year-olds don't fall for that. They're infuriated when we are driving. They're like, they know which games can need Wi-Fi and which ones don't. And they're just like, I don't understand. Why can it not talk to the Prodigy servers right now? That's their favorite math game at the moment. And so, I think that clearly, technology evolves, parenting evolves, and luckily I've got, 4 years and 8 years to go on them, and I imagine the rules of the road in terms of what best practices are will change quite a bit by then.
Yeah. Let's keep in touch about that, because I think it's a universal parental challenge.
Though I will say my husband has threatened, and I'm also we also don't want to embarrass our children, but my husband has threatened to actually go and make all the other parents in their classes sign a pact that we aren't going to give them cell phones until high school. But that said, there's always the person who's like, well, but it would just be so convenient in 5th grade, and then once it's a contagion. Right. Once that happens.
Right. Well, that's great. Thank you very much for your thoughtful answers. Let's go ahead and open up to the room. I think we'll run till 5:40, which is fine. We got started a few minutes late, so we have a good 20 minutes, maybe 22 minutes for questions. So please, the SV should be going around with microphones. I will call on people to just kind of keep it in a sequence. I see a hand right here.
Thank you very much. Brian Hall from the University of Michigan. Just a small world. Prior to Michigan, I was at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point.
Oh.
I won't ask questions about Wisconsin, but I do wonder. So we were talking about COVID. So whether it be personal or really professional, reflecting on the fact that you started your company right at the beginning of of whatever the heck this is, has that changed or reinforced what kind of problems? What do you want to work on? What do you think is the priority that is worth your time, and how did that affect you?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of observations. When we first started the company, we were like, look, we want to build a portfolio, a group of apps that work together, but you would have to use them all. And so we probably need contacts, we need a scheduler, we need events, we need groups. We kind of did this big word map and mind map. And I will say all roads led to contacts, because we're to be thoughtful about events, you have to make sure that the invitation reaches someone, right? To be thoughtful about scheduling, you need to make sure you've got the right way of contacting them. So all roads led to contacts, so we ended up pursuing contacts. And then the pandemic happened probably about 6 months to a year after that. And I will say, my co-founder and I had a conversation at the time where we were like, wow, really glad we didn't start on events, which are now illegal, right? So there was that period where it was like no one can gather, no one can get together. And we were like, thank goodness we didn't start on that project. But I will say, in the early days, and I still have ideas that I'm interested in pursuing around it. But we had ideas around, lots of ideas around proximity. I would say that if you think back to e-groups, which then became Yahoo groups, there's a real need for good group management, and there's no group software that does it really well right now, in my opinion. But they, a lot of times it's very heavily moderated. You forcefully add people to the soccer team. You subtract people when they move away, right? You're moderating messages, all of those types of things. But I was like, I think if you actually kept track of people's locations with their permission, you could figure these things out. right? If you're like, wait, like I would like to reach all the parents and caregivers of the first grade class at this school, if you watch the location patterns for a period of time, you're gonna be like, I understand who does drop off, I understand who does pickup, right? Like it's very easy to actually see that if you can have access to that data. And there's a lot of things that can make social interactions easier. Apple, most valuable company in the world, known and renowned for its design, right? It still is, it's almost, if you think about when you meet someone new, which a lot of times outside of the pandemic, people do almost every day, that blank interface of like add a contact, right? Where it just comes up and you just fill in every field. And by the way, everyone's contacts are a mess. That's the other reason we like the problem, where like people put in like locations or conferences they met at as the last name, they misspell things. We've actually found an entire class of users in our user studies that just say like, you know what to do. And like they just hand it to the other person, which of course also in COVID, like no one's handing each other their phone, like that's weird. No one's even seeing each other physically in person. So like all of the research that we had done early in terms of what we could learn from location went out the window. We were like, well, there are groups of people still gathering, but they're gathering in Zoom and they're not physically coming approximate to each other. So it's really hard with social distancing and work from home to actually understand which groups of people are coming together and meeting. But thankfully, I think that's easing a bit. But it did change. As I said, we were happy we hadn't pursued some priorities, but it did even change some of the feature development and some of the research that we wanted to do and try in terms of its priority and what we could do when.
Another question, please. Over here.
Yeah, I'm Shumin Jai. I joined Google shortly before you left. I'm an HCI person, and we have a bit more HCI researchers at Google today. I have two questions. You don't have to answer both. One is a very specific one, that is behind the 41 shade of blue experiments, what were the key metrics, and more importantly, what was the insight? What made that difference? Is it legibility, or is it just some overall preference or aesthetics? So that's one. And the other is, given what's happening in the tech industry now, like taking TikTok as an example, it's another one. It feels very hard to predict ahead of time. When I first saw it, I thought, what a crazy thing. And I also thought about when the Trump administration wanted to force it's for sale. I thought, oh, Google should buy it, and maybe I should make a suggestion to Sundar. And I said, how shameful an idea is that? But then, even today, like Google, Facebook, all facing very stiff competition from TikTok. The point is that it's very hard to imagine that moment. Sometimes even in hindsight, that the iPhone moment of like multi-touch and the ecosystem and the need, each one of these seem to be actually quite predictable. But together, I feel like it's pretty random. You have a lot more insight, of course, in this.
Yeah, I think that, well, I can answer quickly. On the experiments that we did, we looked at number of emails clicked on. We looked at number of search results clicked on, and we also looked at broad health metrics. Like for a long time, we used searches per user per day, which can momentarily go up if you don't have a great interface. But if it's up substantially and trends in a monotonically increasing way over time, that generally means that users are happy, they're finding what they like, and they're bringing you more search over time. They're doing more search with you. And so all of those trended positively on all the graphs that we plotted on all of those products as we moved to the optimized, neither person's original shade. In terms of the observation of like how things come together, I do think there's always an element of random and there's an element of luck. And I think that one of the strategies I deployed that when I look back at Yahoo, it might sound strange, but I think I should have probably been more bold in is the technology interface, the technology industry as a whole is very acquisitive, right? There's no question that Google extended, in my mind, that Google extended its relevance through acquisitions. YouTube was an acquisition. Google Maps, right, which wasn't actually an acquisition of a two-person company, by the way, that had brilliant user interface design and brilliant Ajax, work in the background. Facebook has really extended its relevance, right? I think the core platform, is probably in decline. I don't know that they necessarily show you the metrics around that, but what's really working is Instagram and WhatsApp, and that's extended their relevance. And so sometimes you get to see that continued innovation and invention from inside the company. These companies are very good at what they do. They can see around the corner and what they should build next. But not all great ideas are going to be invented here or there or anywhere. And so a lot of times the way you have to extend that relevance is through acquisition and then integrating it in a smart way or not, right? Because in all three of those cases, YouTube, WhatsApp, and Instagram, they didn't get integrated. In the case of Where2, with the numeral 2 in it, that was the company that gave foundation for Google Maps, and then Keyhole gave foundation for Google Earth. They were obviously much more integrated. So both models can work depending on the size and scale and technology. But I think that's really important because, to your point, it is kind of random. And when you start to see, hey, this is taking off, and if it doesn't get acquired, it ends up being a really big competitor to you, which is what we're seeing with TikTok now.
Yeah, you had in the light blue mask, yeah. He had his hand up the last time around, so let's go there.
Hello, my name is Frank Liu, PhD student at Arizona State. My question is, you had a lot of experiences before being a CEO at Yahoo. What were things that you felt like really prepared you well to be being a CEO, and what were things that you felt like you weren't prepared for, and learn from those experiences?
It's interesting. For my last 2 years at Google, product management, I always really loved because to me, we'd always describe ourselves as the hub to the spokes, right? It was your job to make sure engineering and design and marketing and PR and sales, all of it was working in concert. And so, but at Google for a long time, we were functionally organized, so I was only working with product managers. You worked with everyone else, but in terms of actual department and organization, it was just product management. For the last 2 years there, we moved to a GM model, which ultimately meant that in Google Maps, I actually had all the Street View drivers working for me. I had marketing. The only two functions I didn't have were legal and finance. So I worked really closely with them, but I didn't have those two divisions. And so I think that I felt overall well prepared, because I think the big question is, have you worked with all those functions? Do you understand how to motivate them, how to manage them, the metrics they should be held to, the types of reporting that you should see, all of those types of things. And so I felt pretty well prepared in those regards. I think that one of the most interesting things that happened, and I heard from some other mentored CEOs who were as I was as a new CEO at Yahoo, talked to me about it, and they're like, there's kind of an arc over the course of your career in terms of the number of decisions you need to make each day. So when you start out, you don't make many decisions, you're kind of told what to do. And as you gain seniority and responsibility, you start making more and more and more decisions. And as you get more senior and ultimately become the CEO or the leader, it's actually striking how few decisions you have to make, but the precision and the certainty with which you have to make them. And so, and different CEOs, you can actually see it, I see it now in the business news all the time, different people take different approaches to that. Some people will delegate as many decisions as they can to kind of save up their energy for the big ones. Other people will make lots of little decisions all the time to kind of keep their hand in it and keep sharp on decision making. And I would say I oscillated my style over my time at Yahoo. Early on I was very involved in lots of decisions, probably too involved, and at the end it became really clear as we were making heady decisions about the shareholder value from Alibaba and ultimately how to structure and run the company. I think that there I had to really pare down the number of decisions I could make so I could be really, really well informed on the ones we were making. So I think that was probably the biggest learning on the job, was this kind of this arc of how many decisions you need to make and how do you train yourself to be ready to and to make really good ones. So I think that was probably the biggest learning that I didn't necessarily feel prepared for or intuitively know beforehand.
We have time for a few more. Doga? I think that's you. Yeah.
Hi, Doa Don from MIT CSIM. My question is, what are your thoughts on the metaverse and the current AR/VR efforts?
harken back to the multi-touch iPhone piece. I would say, I think right now, I don't think the devices are very appealing. I'm sorry if there's people here in the room that are working on the form factors.
It's only half the conference.
Yeah, but I mean, I think actually, I think that no offense, but I think the software piece is coming along farther, right, in AR, VR than the hardware pieces. That's my personal view. So I try and ask myself, like, would I use this? Would my mom use this? Like, that was kind of like with the UI people I worked with at Google, like, I'd be like, wait, this new interface, would like my mom understand it? Would she be able to do it? She's pretty tech savvy, but she's not a computer scientist by any means. And I just think that like right now, you know, there's very few of the devices that I would use or wear, or especially that my mom would wear. So it feels like once that hardware form factor becomes more desirable and sorted out, I do feel like the amount of innovation, and I'm sorry since it's half the conference, but I assume a lot of the work is actually in software. And I think the software is actually, much like multi-touch, is primed and ready for when we get the form factor right. But I feel like the hardware form factor has lagged behind where the interface innovation has surged ahead.
Other questions?
I mean, I would also add, obviously, the whole premise of Sunshine is to get people off their phones and experiencing the people they love and things that they like to do more. So, we're trying to kind of help foster that in-person actual interaction as opposed to the metaverse interaction. So there's a bit of a bias there.
Hi, my name's Ren Paramba. I'm from the University of Maryland. You're talking about parenting and technology earlier and kind of your limits on that. I was wondering what you thought of technology being farther and farther integrated into our education system to the point where, like, even if you don't want your kid to be exposed to technology, they probably will be by, like, elementary school. So I just wanted to know, like, your thoughts on that.
I think it's good because I think it's ultimately going to prepare them, but there's definitely drawbacks. So, I was involved in the development of voice typing and some of Google's technologies on it that are integrated into Google Docs. Now my son uses Google Classroom and Google Docs, and obviously he doesn't know how to spell. And he doesn't necessarily know how to punctuate, and like voice typing just does it for you in large part. And so I'm like, wait, like when's he gonna actually learn how to spell, right? As opposed to just how to say the words and have them transcribed perfectly for him. I guess, it doesn't always do the punctuation perfectly, so he's got it, they at school, they have to check their chops. It's like, capitalization, punctuation, spelling, et cetera. And so, I do think it sometimes holds people back in that regard. But, I think overall, it's probably, they're going to live in a very digital future, right? My son, too, has always struggled with handwriting, as I think a lot of little boys do. And I remember, from pre-K on, they were like, well, but when he is in middle school, high school, college, like, he's going to be keyboarding all of his notes, so it won't matter. And I'm just like, yeah, but it's actually still really helpful to, like, just scribble down a note on it and post it, right? So, I think that there's a balance. I think that it's never going to be that we're completely dependent on technology, but I also think the exposure, especially if it's relevant, somewhat global and going to persist over time, is helpful. I was actually in Finland last week. I haven't gone to any conferences in like 3 years now. I've gone 2 in 2 weeks. But while I was there, I went and visited. I have a cousin who lives there, and I went into a 6th grade classroom and like couldn't believe it when Google Classroom, that was developed by a good friend of mine who headed up education at Google, and I was like, oh wow, like, I mean, I knew we were all using Google Classroom here, but I didn't realize just how much of a global phenomenon it is. The way it operated was very much like the way I've seen classrooms operate here in the United States. And I do think when you've got that kind of global movement, it's going to ultimately serve the kids well in the long run, because they're going to speak this uniform language of all their peers and really be able to collaborate in ways that are very comfortable for them.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for one last question. I saw the hand go up there really high and enthusiastically, so we'll give you the last question of the day.
Hi, Anu from University of Chicago. So one of the byproducts of being in like a high functional community is that you're really around like incredible intelligent people, right? So when you're in a decision-making position, like what are some litmus tests that you use to know that you're making the right decision, which is not just like what feels right?
It's interesting. I mean, I think about a couple of key decisions I made. Like, someone asked me what the best piece of advice I ever got. I wish I could say it came from Jake, but it came from another one of my friends from the same time period, sorry. But my friend Andre, when I was deciding between Google and all the other startup offers and big company offers at the time, I had this really smart friend Andre who looked at all the offers with me, and at the end, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to make the right choice. And he was like, you know, I've looked at all this, I understand all the different like career trajectories, industries, opportunities for the companies and for you personally, and he's like, and you're looking at it all wrong. You're looking at it like it's a right and a wrong choice. And there's just a lot of good choices, and there's the one you pick and commit to and make great. And I think that for smart people, there's a lot of times when you will put pressure on yourself to be like, what's the right thing, what's the right thing, what's the right thing? And you've got to accept when there's actually shades of gray and there's actually a bunch of really good choices, and it really comes to committing to it and making it great. I think another thing that stuck with me is I think overall, when I've looked at my management style, 360s, et cetera, I'm a really decisive person. So I do find making decisions really easy overall. And so I find if I'm really hesitant to make a decision or I second guess myself, this happened once we were looking at putting someone on the Yahoo board, and I just couldn't quite get comfortable with it, right? And I talked to another CEO, and he's like, you know, listening to you, he's like, I don't know your board, I know this person, I just will say that whenever he's like, I'm a really decisive person, whenever I struggle to make a decision or kind of second guess myself, it's usually a warning sign that I don't feel comfortable with the decision I'm trying to make. So I think, you know, those are probably two key things. One, recognizing when there isn't a right answer, there's just a lot of good things, and there's a thing you have to really commit to, invest in, and make great. And also understanding sort of your level of decisiveness, and if you're like, wait, like decisions are usually easy for me, like, but I'm really struggling with this one, and I go back and forth day by day as to which way to go. A lot of times that means, you know, you might be trying to make a decision that doesn't feel comfortable.
Well, thank you for making the decision decisively to be here with us today. Let's give a round of applause. Hang on, one last little thing.
But I have to say, it's a thrill to be here. It's a thrill to, I was really delighted to get the email from Jake, and it's a thrill to have so many industry luminaries and thought leaders in the audience. So thank you guys all for coming today.
This is supposed to be the best chocolate in all of Bend, Oregon. So it's a little thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy that. Okay, so that concludes the closing plenary, and now we're going to go straight into the closing remarks by the general chair. But since you've heard enough from me, I'm not going to say too much, but Manish is going to come on up. We're also going to have our program chair come up and a few other chairs come up. We're going to present the final awards and things for the remainder of our time. This should take about 20 minutes, and then we'll wrap on time around 6. All right, thanks again. And I'll turn it over to Manish.
is it doing that? Okay. Let's see if I can make this work. Yeah. Press X. Makes it green.
On the presenter view that will swap. You can also do mirror display.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Oh, okay.
Oh, but click on the little swap on the
Oh, yeah, up there.
screen. It's swap button. Oh, is it already there? Oh, okay. You're right.
Can you do it?
Oh, it's too high resolution. I think that's the issue. Sorry. Where's displays? Oh, it's not letting me. Yeah, it is. Scaled 720p.
Yes.
Oh, and so that's
And now swap.
Yep.
X. We can do X.
Oh, X. Really? Does it work? No, it didn't. It didn't. Okay. I think it should be fine. It just I'm gonna move my cursor over there and then click.
Presenter notes? Can you just mirror
No,
the displays?
yeah, we can mirror. There, it is mirrored. Oh.
Here.
Finally. All right. I think this audience needs to be the first audience to solve this problem. It's been way too long.
Oh yeah.
Let's try that. This is interesting. What was that? Do you know what to do, Cash?
I think we can swap.
Oh, whoa! Thank you, Jackie. All right, we made it. So we're at the end here of UIST 2022, and this is the closing of the conference. And what I wanted to do is start by just remembering who was here. At the beginning of the conference, we showed a version of this slide, and since the start, we've had a few new registrations. We're up to 481 attendees and 272 students. And the remarkable thing is that people came here from 25 different countries. Now, what's especially interesting to me is that outside of the US, we had really strong participation from East Asia. We had 68 attendees from Japan and 43 from Korea. So lots of people from Asia. We had fewer people from Europe, but still a fair representation. Canada, on the other hand, at 19 was a little low. So, so we're going to blame Canada on this one. As the kids these days say, we did the thing. What did we do? Well, we started on Saturday with a doctoral symposium. We had eight students that were finishing up their PhDs give fantastic presentations to a distinguished set of doctoral symposium chairs. We had a whole bunch of papers with lots and lots of technical innovations and really excellent presentations. We had a chance to come together and talk to one another. And seeing as this was a WIST that took place over Halloween, we also had people dress up, which was fantastic. Here were some of the excellent costumes that you guys had on. And there was a contest for the best costume, and this was the winning entry based on our internal site. So is Vivian Shen still here? Yeah, okay, we have something for you. Yeah, thank you. And as we usually do with WIST tradition, we had an excellent demos program that took place on Monday night with all sorts of demos. Here are a few pictures. And we even had remote participation from people giving their demos from afar. At the same time, we also had our student innovation contest with these fantastic levitating, ultrasound-based levitation devices. And we found all kinds of things that could levitate that we could play with, including food, as in this case, or drink. And then we had our banquet last night down in Sun River. And to me, I think one of the really nice things about this WIST is that we were all able to come together and reconnect in person. So I want to now take a few minutes to give out the last few awards, and I'm going to bring up Eitan Adar to run this part of the closing.
So I'm not going to do a lot of the award giving out. I'm going to actually have the different subcommittees come. So student innovation contest, posters, demos, come on up. While you're doing that, maybe we can all give a round of applause to all the wonderful presentations, demos, posters, everybody who came. Thanks. So demos are first.
All right, thank you very much. Me and my two colleagues here organized the demos. I hope you had a lot of fun on Monday evening. We had altogether, including a few last-minute demos, 64 demos, which was a comparatively very high number, which also shows how eager people were to get back to a physical conference again. So, and we had a few demos, and we wanted to especially award them with an award. And we have the two types: a juried award and a People's Choice Award. And here you see our awesome jury that made the decision, looked at all of the demos, discussed it, and then sent us their results. A little round of applause for these 5 people. So, and the juried Best Demo Award winner is Prototyping Soft Devices with Interactive Bioplastics by Marion Koller, Madalina Luciana Nicole, Aditya Shekhar-Nitala, Marc Desier, and Jürgen Steimler. Madalina, Aditya, if you guys are here, can you come to the stage? Maybe they also traveled home already. In this case, I will keep the award and send it to him later.
The best demo honorable mention goes to, the first one is demonstration of Meta4X. an underground moment display that changed its physical properties. This is by Takeru Hashimoto, Shigeo Yoshida, and Takuji Narumi. And you can come together. And the next demo award is Point Cloud Capture and Editing for AR Environmental Design. And this is by Zeyu Wang, Song Nyungjin, and Paul Asante, and Julie Dorsey. And if any of you is here, please come to take the award.
Photo done? Yeah, it's under control, no problem.
Okay, then Best Demo People Choice Award goes to demonstrating fiber-quid techniques to prototype high-resolution flexible and kirigami circuits with a fiber laser engraver by Zeyu Yan, Anup Saria, Sarah Yusuf, Jimin Yen, and Waishu Pen. Congratulations. And People's Choice Award honorable mention goes to Foresight and non-contact force sensing with laser spectral imaging by Shiyu Pei, Pradumachari, Shu Wan, Xiao Yang, Aksha Kadambi, and Yan Chan. Congratulations.
All right, then moving on to the Student Innovation Awards. We were also blessed to have a fantastic jury, so quick round of applause for the jury who helped us make the decision. And they were tasked with an incredibly complicated task because there were so many amazing demos. We were really impressed with how far the students managed to push this very experimental technology that we gave out. So I want to have one round of applause for all the students for their effort and what they managed to achieve in this 2 weeks. And then we'll move on to the actual awards. So the jury award goes to Top Levy. And I do the honorable mentions as well so that we get them all on the stage as well. So Top Levy is the jury award. The honorable mention is Shadow Astro and Ultrabots. So Jiwon Kim and Hyung Ya Gil, Jia Chong Lee and Shen Fang Gao, Mirat Fardian and Marcus Friedel. Please come to the front for your award.
All right, and then the People Choice Award goes to Chingy Tai and Chen Kong-su, the Garnish into Thin Air. And then the People Choice honorable mention goes to Ji-won Kim and Hyun-jang Gil, Top Levy. So congratulations again. So come to the stage.
So while they're doing pictures, Tice, did you want to say? Did you just want to do the thank you for this?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so like next to all the participants, we also really want to thank UCL for their generous sponsoring of the hardware for this contest. And a special thanks to Diego Martinez Plasencia for his endless support. He was always there. Thank you so much. He's standing here in the back. Give him a big hand of applause.
Moving on to the Best Poster Awards. So, yeah, I'm also representing my co-chair, June Kim, who had to leave early today. But the People's Choice Best Poster Award goes to RC Sketch. Sketch Build and Control Your Dream Vehicles by Hambit Kim, Jae-ho Song, Jun Hyop Lee, and Sok-hong Bae. Okay, sounds good. So we have 3 posters for the People's Choice Honorable Mention. First, To Reflect the Maker, using reflection to support skill learning in maker spaces by Deshida Truakia, Pei-Ling Jiang, Brent Liu, Mackenzie Leek, and Stephanie Mueller. To Wire Sketch by Manual Interactions for 3D Curve Networks in VR by Sang-Han Lee, Tagyu Jin, Jun Hyop Lee, and Sok-hong Bae. And A11Y Board, using multi-model input and output to make digital AI towards artboards accessible to blind users by Ju Hao Zhang and Jacob Webberg. Congratulations.
And then we have one last award for the best talk. This goes to Kentaro Yasu for a fantastic performance today. And Magnus Shea, please come.
While they're doing one last picture again, let's just thank everyone.
All right. Let's see. Okay. No conference is put on by anyone or even a few people alone, so we do need to thank again organizations and people that made all this possible. We are an ACM conference sponsored by SIGCHI and SIGGRAPH. SIGGUI, I don't know. SIG end of the week. That's what it is. Well, I got here Friday. It's the end of my week. And our platinum sponsor, Meta Reality Labs Research. Our silver sponsors, Adobe and Autodesk. Our bronze sponsors, Google, Intel, UCL, Tableau, Intuitive, and Toyota Research Institute. And especially to the 2022 team, we are going to thank each committee member by name, but very quickly, because Manish can speak very fast when he has to. All right? He's an auctioneer in his spare time.
You give me too much credit. So, you know, Jake and I couldn't have put on this conference without a great deal of help from many of you sitting in the audience. I'm going to read out the names of people that helped us, but I'd like you to hold your applause, and we'll applaud them all at the end. So, first off, our program chairs, Eitan Adar and Vidya Settler. They were joined by a program technology chair to make sure all of the technology for doing the programming work ran properly, John Jun Young Chung. The treasurers, Dan Afrigan and Scott Carter. Local Arrangements Chair, Cindy Grimm. Our Hybridization Chair, Frederick Broody. The Discord Chair, Jotaro Shigeyama. The Demo Chairs, Jun Nishida, Michael Wesley, and Mingray Ray Zhang. The Posters Chairs, Doga Dogan and Jian Kim. The Doctoral Symposium Chairs, Alexandra Ion, Dan Olson, and Shuman Shai. Our Visions Chair was Jim Holland. The Lasting Impact Chair was Takeo Igarashi. The Awards Chair was Bjorn Hartman. Our Student Innovation Chairs were Thais Roman and Ryo Suzuki. Web and Design Chairs, Jane E. and Jasper Tran O'Leary. Publicity Chairs, Min-Suk Chung and Anusha Watana. Our Sponsorship Chairs, Chris Harrison and Steve Oni. Proceedings Chairs, Anhang Guo and Liang He. Our Student Volunteer Chairs, Lisa Elkin and Tisha Sathkapadi. And they were joined by 45 amazing SVs that were running around doing a lot of heavy lifting over the course of this conference. I'm gonna break my rule here. I'd like a round of applause for the SVs. Okay, a few more committee members. Our accessibility chairs, Amanda Swearingen, Venkatesh Potluri, and Yi Hao Peng. Our SIGCHI Cares representative, Celine Latulippe. Our diversity chairs, Martez Mott and Alexa Siu. Sustainability chairs, Jason Jacques and Pedro Reynolds Cular. Data chairs, Thomas Langerak and Jingdong Yang. Our video and video previews chairs, Sven Meyer, Stephen Villa, Hyungyu Shin, and Juni Zhu. And our live streaming chair, Kashyap Todi. Our social chairs, Donald Degerin, Bruno Fruchard, and Jasmine Liu. So that, in total, were the committee members that really helped us put together this conference. And here are all their faces. Please, let's give them a big hand of applause. All right, and finally, thanks to all of you. This conference is really about all of us together here. So again, a big round of applause for all of us. And that concludes UIST 2022. All right, now, UIST doesn't just end with 2022, right? There's 2023 to think about. And we have a new set of general chairs. Finally, Jake and I can step down and hand the baton over to Sean Fulmer and Jeff, Jeff Hahn. Sean and Jeff, please come up and I'll pass the baton.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, unfortunately, Jeff had to go to the airport. His flight was, basically taking off in, I guess,
30 minutes or something, and he wanted to stay, and I was like, no, you will not be able to actually get on the airplane if you stay here, and so he had to leave. But I'm delighted to be here to represent Jeff and I and many other people that have been trying to think about UIST 2023. And so I think we've all had a wonderful, amazing time. Yeah, so this is me, Sean Fulmer, and Jeff. So we're going to be general chairs. And we've all had such a wonderful time in Bend, Oregon. Basically waking up this morning and yesterday morning and seeing the snow come down on the beautiful Deschutes River. I hope you all had a chance to enjoy all of the great food and most importantly, the company. This is so exciting to be here together again after so many years during the pandemic. So I'll take this off as well. And so it's sad, for us to say now goodbye to Bend. It was a wonderful time. But we're excited to announce UIST 2023. And so as Manish said, UIST continues. And, after Scott, I believe, said, after every Chi, there's a UIST, and after every UIST, there's a Chi. And so we'll be back again next year after Chi as well. And so I'm excited to sort of show you where we might be going next year. So, and let me take off this shirt, or sorry, this jacket too. Turns out this jacket is tricky. Okay, well, you can kind of see it. So, again, hopefully you all can see where we might be going next year. So, goodbye, Oregon, and hello, California, just across the border down south. So, we're excited to go back to the Bay Area, and many of you are familiar with it. Alcatraz Island, the Palace of Fine Arts, beautiful beaches in Santa Cruz, wonderful vineyards in Napa and Sonoma, and the Russian River here we have here. And so we're really excited to bring UIST back to California, but to stay on the best coast. No offense to all the other coasts out there, but West Coast is best coast. And have this wonderful group of people come together somewhere in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we mean that in the broadest possible sense because we're still trying to find the exact location. But we're excited to have it, and we will be having it. Believe me, it's happening. And we put together an amazing set of organizers, and I'm so excited to work with Jeff to make UIST a really exciting venue and continue the tradition that I think obviously Manish and Jake did a great job of reviving after this long time. Oh, birds. Look at the beautiful noises that you might be able to hear if you come to us in California. They don't have birds here, so just joking. So we put together an amazing team that's going to be working, night and day, of course, over the next year to make UIST amazing. I wanted to highlight some people. Obviously, I won't be able to talk about everybody, but we put together an amazing program committee, or at least the program committee chairs who will be assembling the program committee. And so Natalie Ritchie from Microsoft Research and Jürgen Steimle from Saarland University are going to be our amazing program chairs and have long been connected with UIST and other SIGCHI conferences, and I think will bring a lot of guidance to our process and make sure we have as an amazing or maybe an even better program than this year. We're excited to see more papers and more amazing demos and other things. And we have already reached out to a lot of people as well to form a really great organizing committee. However, we want to get more people involved in organizing and really have an open call for a lot of the roles that we have. And so hopefully this QR code works, because if it doesn't, then I apologize. And so I'll also make sure to find the social chairs and we can tweet this out. But we'd love to have you, if you're interested in getting involved in organizing for Chi 2023 and beyond, please fill out this form. It's very, very simple and fast. Obviously, we can't have, even though there were something like 53 people, that were on the committee last year, there's obviously more than 53 people here and that are out there as well, so we can't have everyone, but we'd love to have more diverse participation as well. So we're super excited to form a great committee and have a wonderful time. And lastly, I wanted to say, basically, come back I think we've all had a wonderful time here at in-person UIST 2022, and so we're really excited to have it in the Bay Area somewhere next year in 2023, and we're looking at probably the dates of October 29th to November 1st, just because those are the dates that don't conflict with the major the major conferences that are out there. So you can pencil those in, but we'll make sure to announce when we've secured the final position. So that's basically it from us from UIST 2023, but I'd like to introduce to the stage a man many of you probably know, Dr. Professor Scott Hudson. Yeah, okay. Well, and UIST steering chair. UIST steering chair.
Oh, yes. So this has been a great UIST. I know because I've been to all 35 of them. And this has definitely been one of the best. I also know that UIST, as we saw, really happens due to the work of a lot of different people. But first and foremost, it's the general chairs who make this conference work. Our general chairs, Jake and Manish, have really done a great job this year to make all of this happen, and I want us all to thank them for all their efforts in this. All right, thanks, guys. All right, and with that, I think we're done.